Do you really believe that man has reached Mars? Or are we facing the biggest space hoax in modern history? This question may sound absurd at first glance. After all, we live surrounded by impressive images. It's robots exploring craters, live broadcasts directly from the red surface. But what if I told you that part of this could have been built right here, on Earth? Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you. For years, NASA has dominated the headlines with promises of colonization, rovers that look like something out of fictional movies, and discoveries about water and possible signs of life on Mars. This all sounds inspiring. But when we look closer, some uncomfortable questions arise. Why do so many technical failures occur at critical moments in missions? Why do officially released images often appear overly manipulated or even created by CGI? And why are there testimonials from former employees who swear that not everything is as it seems? The word hoax can be strong, but it resonates strongly. In conspiracy forums, in leaked files, and in testimonies that have been ignored. We're not just talking about cheap conspiracy theories. We're talking about possible secret space programs, about billion-dollar budgets used for projects that never become public knowledge. What if, in fact, the mission to explore Mars is being used as a distraction from something much bigger? Have you ever stopped to think why, with so many technological advances, we still don't have a single 100% clear and unquestionable image of certain regions of Mars? Or why do some landscapes look too much like the deserts of New Mexico or the Atacama? Are we really seeing Mars, or just what they want us to believe it is? This video is not intended to convince anyone, but to open their eyes, to raise the questions that no one wants to ask. Because sometimes the truth can be hidden right under our noses, disguised as science, covered in CGI, and protected by institutional silence. And most intriguing of all is what comes next when we start to put the pieces of this cosmic puzzle together. We realize that the questions are much more abundant than the answers. It's not just about distrust, it's about really wanting to know what's behind the scenes. It's about the right to question, to look beyond the polished surface that we are given as absolute truth. And perhaps you, like many people who have come this far, have already felt this discomfort, that strange feeling that something is wrong. But no one talks about it, so I want to hear from you. In truth, what do you think about all this? Have you ever had the feeling that something is being hidden? Have you ever become suspicious of the way NASA presents its missions? Leave your vision here in the comments, even if it's just a doubt, a hypothesis, or even a criticism. This space is ours. When you comment, you not only strengthen this collective investigation, but you also help spread this message to more people who, perhaps, are asking the same questions as you. If this type of content makes sense to you, if it arouses your curiosity or even outrage, don't forget to like this video. It may seem like little, but each like shows the algorithm that this topic matters. And this makes it reach more people, generates more debate, and brings even more truths out of the darkness. And of course, if you want to continue exploring these mysteries with me, these hidden stories and these theories that no one has the courage to bring to light, subscribe here to the channel. Your presence here is what sustains this community that is growing precisely because it refuses to accept everything they say without question. Now, prepare your chin, because the next revelations could shake everything. If you thought about the space race, now I want to go even deeper into this subject. In recent years, we have seen a true space race reignite, only this time with a new protagonist, the private sector. While NASA remains a symbol of scientific authority, names like Elon Musk and his SpaceX dominated the news with promises of interplanetary travel, human colonies on Mars, and even the bold idea of transforming the red planet into a new home for humanity. It even sounds like a science fiction script. But is that really it? The transmissions that reach us are always carefully produced. Cameras with absurd definition inside moving capsules. Images of rockets landing with millimeter precision. Emotional speeches talking about the future of the human species. And yet, when it comes to Mars, many of these images look strangely generic, as if they came straight out of a graphic simulator. Have you ever noticed how repetitive some of the photos of Mars look? Same colors, same rock formations, same dusty atmosphere, and curiously, very similar to isolated terrestrial environments. Like the Atacama Desert in Chile or barren landscapes. In Iceland, this in itself is not proof of anything, of course. But when we begin to observe the pattern of technical failures that occur precisely at crucial moments, such as loss of signal from probes, interruptions in live transmissions, and inconsistencies in received data, common sense begins to be challenged. A recent example was the InSight probe, which, after promising a revolution in Martian seismic study, began to present communication and functioning problems months after landing. Before that, the Mars Polar Lander simply disappeared in 1999, and the official explanation was software failure. Have you ever stopped to think how many times we hear this? And then comes the colonization narrative. According to Elon Musk, SpaceX intends to take humans to Mars in the next decade. But here's a question that few ask. Why the rush to leave Earth? Was it just out of scientific ambition and natural curiosity? Or is there a greater sense of urgency behind it? Something we haven't been told. It is as if, suddenly, global leaders have awakened to a hidden need to find refuge off the planet. A contingency plan. This idea may seem exaggerated, but think about it. At the same time that we are being sold the dream of Mars, more and more information about the behind the scenes of these missions is classified as confidential. Did you know that several internal NASA documents remain confidential to this day, even decades after missions have ended? Why hide something if there is nothing to hide? And the most curious thing is that, while some missions are widely publicized, with cinematic marketing, others, such as the Mars Observer, which also mysteriously disappeared in 1993, are forgotten in time. Few people have even heard of it, and the records about what really happened to this equipment. Incomplete. Technicians. Vaguely explanatory. As if no one wanted to look too closely. It's as if we were watching a great show, and only a few people had access to the original script. With each announcement, each new image, each lost probe, it seems that we are invited to believe, without question. But what if some of the truth is being carefully edited before it reaches us? There is a subtle transformation happening, a change in mindset, in focus, in narrative. The discourse of exploration became a discourse of survival. The idea of discovering Mars became the perfect excuse to prepare an elite to abandon Earth, while the rest of humanity watches everything as if it were entertainment. It's strong to say that, I know. But sometimes the hidden truth is exactly where they don't want us to look, and that's why we're here, on this journey. Because the objective is not to create certainties, but to provoke questions. Instill the healthy doubt that drives any real investigation. The impact of this isn't just in the high-definition images or shiny rockets. It's in the way these stories shape our perceptions, our decisions, and even our collective destiny. Comment there. That makes sense to me. I want to know who else is connecting the dots. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. There is a fine line between reality and acting, and when we look closely at the images NASA releases of Mars, we begin to notice uncomfortable similarities. Many of these landscapes are virtually identical to isolated regions here on Earth. A recurring example is the Atacama Desert in Chile, known for its reddish soil and extreme climate. Interestingly, this same location is often used for space mission simulations. Coincidence or aesthetic preparation to train the narrative? Arizona, with its arid reliefs and vast fields of rocks, also appears in several reports as a NASA test environment. But when we compare official images of the Martian surface with photographs taken at these locations, it's hard not to notice an almost disturbing visual similarity. And the most intriguing thing is that, when searching for the original mission records, many of these images appear with edited, cropped metadata or without complete source information. Why? There are even those who say that much of the visual content released is recreated in closed studios using CGI and advanced post-production techniques. This is not mere speculation. Several visual effects experts have already analyzed these images and identified elements that would be, at the very least, highly unlikely in an alien environment. Duplicated shadows, unusual reflections, and the absence of moving particles in videos that should record Martian winds are just some of the points raised. These are small flaws, but they betray a possible mise-en-scène, as if something escaped in the rush to keep the story intact. And then the reports emerge: leaked documents, anonymous testimonials, people who worked behind the scenes and say they saw things that could never be revealed to the public. A former imaging engineer hired by an outsourced company that provided services to NASA said in an unofficial interview that some of the photos of Mars that passed through his hands had clear instructions: remove traces of life, correct horizon, apply atmospheric filter. This says much more than it seems. Because if there is something to be hidden, it means there is something to be discovered. And we're not just talking about hiding technical details. We're talking about the possibility that these missions are serving a much deeper narrative: symbolic and strategic construction to prepare the collective mentality for an inevitable transformation. If people believe that Mars is inhospitable, empty, and distant, they will naturally accept the idea that only the elite, well-equipped, will be able to explore it. But if they happen to discover that it already houses something or someone, the story changes completely. Notice how, over the years, the image of Mars has been carefully shaped. At first, it was just a lifeless red ball. Then, rumors of canals, geometric structures, pyramids emerged. And with each new decade, a small update: water trails, formations that may indicate microbial life, and finally, the possibility that there once was a complete ecosystem there. But all of this is presented in a slow, fragmented way, almost like a desensitization process. Why not show everything at once? This way of disseminating information, always in controlled doses, generates dependence. It keeps us watching, waiting for the next announcement, the next image, and at the same time, it keeps us away from the truth. It's as if we were in a dark room where only one light bulb is turned on at a time. We never see the whole, and that brings us to a crucial point: the journey of space exploration. It's maybe less about discovery and more about controlling the narrative. Whoever controls what we see controls what we think. And whoever controls what we think influences our decisions, our beliefs, our fears. If Mars is sold as neutral, uninhabited territory, then any colonization project seems legitimate. But if there are traces of previous occupation, or even current activity, we are faced with an ethical, political, and even existential dilemma. Many of the signs that suggest this possibility are hidden between the lines of the reports: symmetrical structures captured by probes, blurred areas, and official images. And, perhaps most intriguingly, regions that simply stop being monitored after a certain time. Some NASA files show areas that, for unclear reasons, were marked as without scientific relevance and excluded from future missions. But who decides what is or is not relevant, and based on what? Then we begin to realize that the mystery is not just on Mars. It's here, on Earth, in the silence, in the incomplete files, in questions that have no place in press conferences, in strategic transmission cuts, and, above all, in the certainty that the more controlled the information, the more powerful the lie or the illusion becomes. Comment there. I'm on this journey too. I want to know who else is seeing beyond the surface. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. We start to calmly connect the dots. A theory is formed, not as a delusion, but as a logical construction in the face of flaws, omissions, and repeating patterns. The theory is clear and, at the same time, uncomfortable. Some of the missions to Mars simply never happened, or at least, not in the way they were presented to the public. What if they were simulated? What if it was all part of a carefully crafted smokescreen to hide something much bigger happening far from society's eyes? The most disturbing thing is that these are not just hypotheses thrown to the wind. There are documents, many of them leaked anonymously on discussion forums and alternative archives that contain codes, agendas, internal protocols, and even budget records intended for unclassified external operations. In one of these documents, the term low-gravity atmospheric simulation in isolated territory appears linked to a project named Red Echo, supposedly started in the 90s and renovated in 2011. The location? Classified. The function? Simulate Martian missions in a controlled environment. Some of these files emerged after hacker attacks that hit servers at third-party agencies involved with NASA, and although they were never officially confirmed, the technical language and formats of the documents coincide with the internal standards used by the agency. Too much of a coincidence to be dismissed. What further reinforces this possibility are the testimonies. Former employees, retired engineers, and even digital imaging consultants who worked with NASA materials have already given clues about what may have really happened. One of these reports comes from a technician who provided freelance image analysis services on an unidentified mission. According to him, some of the photos had errors that could only happen in environments with artificial lighting. When he questioned his superiors, he received a single answer: these images should not raise questions. Just adjust what was requested. And he was never called back for new projects. There is also the famous case of a former flight data analyst who, while doing an internal audit, discovered gaps in the location records of a Mars probe. Instead of continuous trajectory data as expected, the files were full of time jumps, as if there were periods when the probe simply disappeared. Detail: these jumps always happened during live broadcasts when the images had to be cut due to technical problems. The official explanation was a failure in the telemetry system. But is it really? What if the transmissions had been manipulated? A curious video circulated on parallel networks a few years ago. It showed what appeared to be behind-the-scenes footage, with a replica of the Martian surface set up in a studio, under controlled lights, with a rover being driven by technicians in street clothes. No spacesuit, no isolation. Of course. The video was quickly removed from mainstream platforms. The profiles that posted the content disappeared. But whoever saw it, saw it. And whoever keeps this type of record doesn't forget it. This type of revelation makes us rethink blind trust in official broadcasts. Because it's not just about science anymore. It's about storytelling, control, and mindset. It's about how large institutions shape the perception of reality in their favor, keeping the masses occupied with the spectacle, while the real script takes place in silence, away from the cameras. Behind the scenes, the hidden truth may lie precisely in this imbalance between what is shown and what is suppressed. The question that needs to be asked is, why build all this technical narrative and symbolic apparatus around Mars if the data is still so fragmented, contradictory, and incomplete? Could it be that these simulations were created to hide a larger project, a secret space program operating in another direction outside the public timeline, with goals we can't even imagine? Some theorists claim that part of the resources destined for Martian exploration was in fact redirected to confidential missions aimed at creating structures in remote regions of our own planet or in discrete orbits, far from any civil radar. This theory matches reports of undocumented activities in underground bases and tests with experimental propulsion. If this is real, and there are signs that it is, then Mars may be nothing more than a curtain, a carefully assembled stage, while the real play takes place behind the scenes. We are talking about strategic decisions, geopolitical agendas camouflaged by science. When talking about colonization, there is a much larger component involved: power. Whoever arrives first dominates. But what if this arrival is just symbolic? A seal of ownership disguised as a scientific mission. In this scenario, everything makes sense, staging an achievement to validate the occupation. While the real interest lies in another layer, in another agenda torment there that makes sense to me. I want to know who is also seeing that there is something much bigger behind all of this. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because up until now, we've talked about theories, leaked documents, suspicious behind the scenes, But what about when we start to see the evidence with our own eyes? That's where things change levels. Because when what was once just speculation becomes visually proven, the impact is inevitable. And more than that, it completely transforms the way we see the narrative that has been told to us to date. Let's start with something simple but powerful: images. NASA has already released hundreds of official photos of the surface of Mars, captured by rovers like Curiosity and Perseverance. These are widely publicized records shown in newspapers, magazines, documentaries, and used as visual proof of human or almost human presence on Martian soil. But what happens when we put these images side by side with photos taken here on Earth, in remote regions like the Utah desert or the Atacama in Chile? The answer, honestly, is scary. Identical reliefs, repeated erosion patterns, stones with the same wear. Even the colors, supposedly altered by the Martian atmosphere, have tones and contrasts that match the effects that can be applied with simple color correction filters. And there's more. In some cases, even the arrangement of the rocks seems copied, as if they had been manually replicated on a recording set. And you might think, okay, that could be a coincidence. But when coincidences accumulate, doubt becomes a pattern, and the shadows. This detail goes unnoticed by many people, but it is one of the most delicate points in space images. Analysis by light physics experts revealed that in some NASA photos, the shadows cast by objects on the ground do not follow a single point of light origin, as would be expected with the Sun on Mars. Instead, there are multiple directions, broken angles, and even shadows that simply disappear where they should continue. This, technically, is impossible to happen in the open field with a single light source. But it happens, repeatedly, in records supposedly captured on the Red Planet. And it doesn't stop there. In several live broadcasts made during Martian missions, it is possible to hear sounds in the background that definitely should not be there. A kind of muffled echo, as if the room had walls nearby, or mechanical noises that are much more reminiscent of the vibration of industrial air conditioning than the absolute silence of outer space. In one of the most analyzed videos, there is even a moment in which what appears to be a distant bark is heard in the background, something completely impossible on Mars, where the air density would not allow sound to propagate in this way. NASA has never officially commented on these records. I just said that compression failures can generate interference. But have you ever heard a compression failure that mimics a dog? And if we go back in time a little, some statements by astronauts further reinforce the feeling that there is something being omitted. Buzz Aldrin, one of the most respected names of the space age, even declared in an interview that there are things out there strange that we can't explain. At another time, he described pulsating lights that accompanied the Apollo mission and changed direction abruptly. He did not clearly state that it was an unknown technology, but he also did not rule out this possibility. When someone with this background lets something like this slip, so the least we can do is listen carefully. Another classic case is that of Gordon Cooper, astronaut on the Mercury Atlas 9 mission, who claimed, on several occasions, to have witnessed unidentified flying objects during flight tests and also in orbit. He went so far as to say that these objects were not of this world and that the government knew this, but chose to keep them confidential. Again, we are talking about trained, prepared people inserted within the official space program, who decided to break the silence, even though they knew the weight their words could have. And if the pattern repeats itself on different fronts, manipulated images, incoherent sounds, contradictory reports, it's because there is something there. It's no longer a question of whether to believe it or not. It's a matter of realizing that there are too many cracks in the facade to continue pretending that everything is normal. And when so many loose ends begin to line up, the hidden truth stops being just a mystery and becomes a real, palpable possibility. This type of revelation is not just a shock for those who consume this content with curiosity. It represents a profound transformation in the way we interpret authorities, official reports, and the certainties we have been sold since we were children. Because if they fooled us about Mars, what else could they be keeping us away from? What other journeys are being waged away from the public eye? How many decisions were made based on incomplete versions of reality? The feeling that remains is that we are in the middle of a game of mirrors, where the reflection is beautiful, clean, inspiring, ... But just look from another angle to see the wires, the reflectors, the cracks in the scenery. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Right there, I'm on this journey too. I want to know who else is looking beyond the official image. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because, given all of this, the question we hear most is always the same. But what about the official version? Yes, it exists. And yes, it tries to answer each of these suspicions with technical arguments, with theories based on science, with an authority structure that, for many people, is enough to end the debate. But when we allow ourselves to go beyond what we have been taught, when we open space to doubt, not out of rebellion, but out of legitimate curiosity, the contradictions begin to appear more clearly. NASA, for example, considers many of these claims to be absurd, the result of misinformation or a misinterpretation of data. They clearly state that the Martian missions are real, that the images are authentic, and that the challenges faced on each journey are part of the natural scientific process. They say that problems with probes, such as those that disappeared or lost communication, are expected failures in such a hostile and distant environment. And when asked about strange sounds or poorly explained images, the answer is usually interference, digital compression, atmospheric distortions simulated in the laboratory. Could it be? Science is, indeed, complex. But if all this has already been clarified so convincingly, why are there still hundreds of documents classified as top secret even decades after the missions? Why, in the era of transparency and access to information, are there records that remain inaccessible with censored sections, erased dates, and hidden senders? If there is nothing to hide, what justifies this level of secrecy? And more, why, in so many official reports, are precisely the most intriguing images treated as without scientific relevance? In one of the files released partially through FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, a series of images captured by satellites orbiting Mars were recorded as surface anomalies and classified for internal analysis without public disclosure. Anomalies. The word itself already carries weight. But instead of investigating further, the response was to silence, archive, and move on. The official narrative also fails to explain why, with all the technological advances we have, there are still constant failures in transmissions. In 2021, a Perseverance broadcast was abruptly interrupted due to loss of signal. So far, understandable. But what caused discomfort was the fact that, in the previous minutes, a rover was approaching an unusual rock formation with geometric angles that caught the attention of even independent geologists who were following the mission. Coincidence? Perhaps. But it is always at this type of moment that the connection drops. The image freezes, or the feed is closed for technical reasons. And here comes the debate. Are we facing a succession of technological misfortunes? Or is there a conscious decision to omit what escapes the script? It must be remembered that NASA is a government agency. And like any entity linked to the state, it has political, strategic, and even military commitments. There has already been, for example, direct cooperation between NASA and the U.S. Department of Defense, especially in satellite projects and orbital mapping. It is not impossible to imagine that certain discoveries, if classified as sensitive, would not immediately be withheld under secrecy for national security reasons. But what kind of information can be so sensitive as to justify decades of silence? Perhaps evidence of more complex microbial life than they want to admit. Perhaps structures that don't fit expected geological patterns. Or even traces of ancient technological interventions that cannot be explained by conventional archaeology. These are uncomfortable questions because they force us to leave the comfortable position of spectator and take on the role of questioner. We are faced with a mentality dilemma. Believe in what is delivered to us in a packaged form with a seal of trust, or dig deeper, even if this takes us to uncomfortable, lonely, and, at times, disturbing places. Science is wonderful, but it is also made by people. And people have agendas, fears, interests, and loyalties. It's not about discrediting science. It's about understanding that science, like any human construction, can be shaped, directed, silenced. Carl Sagan himself said, "The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence." And this phrase, when applied here, resonates as a warning. Because the absence of clear explanations, the absence of unrestricted access, the absence of transparent public debate, all of this is, yes, evidence that there is more than there seems to be. That's why these gaps matter. Because when a system tries so hard to convince us of a single version, doubt becomes not only legitimate. I want to see who else is observing the details that no one talks about. Now, I want to go even deeper into the subject. Because in the midst of so much evidence, fragmented documents, and divergent versions, there is something that almost no one has seen, or perhaps chosen not to see. A confidential document, leaked in 2019, fell into the hands of a small group of independent researchers. He didn't make headlines. It didn't appear in the newspapers. He disappeared from social media in a matter of hours. But what this document suggested changes everything. It was a simple file, in PDF format, without a logo, but with an internal authentication code used by defense agencies. At first, it seemed like just one of many other discredited leaks. But one line in particular caught attention. Active observation. Unit Sector 03, constant operational activity since 1992. The location? Numeric coordinates with date and time, when placed on a reference map of the planet Mars. These coordinates pointed directly to a region known as Cydonia Mensae, the same one where the famous face of Mars was recorded decades ago. This is not just any place. It is a point full of controversies, marked by formations that many consider artificial. And now, with this new leak, a new theory is starting to gain strength. Something is working there. A structure, an active operating point, but by whom? By NASA, by some international agency, or by a group we don't even know. The most intriguing thing is that the document did not refer to a facility under construction, but to one already active. This was what shocked the researchers the most. Since 1992, this means that if this data is correct, someone would have managed to not only successfully land on Mars at that time, but also establish something permanent. This was years before the first truly functional rover NASA admitted to. Sending this was before the popular internet, before Google Earth, before most of the population even dreamed of actually exploring another planet. The coldness of the document contrasts with the weight of what it reveals. No emotion, no drama, just lines and codes. But those who know how to read beyond the text see a hidden truth that screams between the paragraphs. An active operating base on Martian soil for more than 30 years, not a mission, a presence, and then the question completely changes tone. We are no longer talking about photographic forgeries, nor about studio staging. We are talking about something much deeper, an operation that has been hidden for decades. And if this is real, and the details match other leaks, which is disturbing enough, then we are looking at the biggest act in modern history, the greatest collective illusion ever created. The document also includes a curious attachment, a signal frequency graph, classified as non-terrestrial standard pending decoding. This, in itself, would be enough to trigger all the alerts. But the annex also contains a coded term, VR exhumact. Many have tried to decipher it. The most accepted hypothesis: Human Activity Verification Protocol. That is, Human Activity Verification Protocol. On Mars, since 1992. And when this type of information emerges, it is not accompanied by official announcements. There is no press conference. There are no public explanations. Everything remains shrouded in silence, as if it had never existed. The sites that shared this content, all erased. The profiles that commented, silenced. The forums they discussed, disabled. The pattern of disappearance is almost choreographed. A censorship script so well orchestrated that it is more revealing than the censored content itself. And what to do with it? Ignoring it would be easy. Most people do just that. He goes on with his life, believing in the beautiful images and technological promises of the next mission. But for those who have seen behind the curtain, ignoring it becomes impossible. Because something inside us changes. And from then on, each new photo, each new video released by NASA stops being proof and becomes a question. If someone has been there since 1992, what is being done? Who is behind this? What is the real objective of all this? Was it an experiment, a secret colonization attempt, or something even darker? The mind travels, of course, but not because of fantasy, but because of not having answers. And when there is no answer, doubt turns into fuel. In search, on journey, and it is this journey that connects us here. Because perhaps you too are beginning to feel that there is something bigger, hidden on the fringes of what we call official. Reality, something that defies logic, that escapes the common narrative. And that could have a much deeper impact than just redefining the history of space exploration.com in there. That makes sense to me. I want to know who is feeling that this story goes much further than we imagine. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because after everything we've analyzed so far, from failed transmissions to suspicious images, from leaked documents to muffled reports, the question that resonates most strongly is no longer are they hiding something, but yes, what exactly are they trying to protect? Because if there really has been an active presence on Mars since the 90s, if there is something being kept out of reach of the global population, then we are talking about a level of secrecy that is not just strategic, it's existential. Think with me, who has access to this type of information? Who participates in these under-the-radar operations? They are certainly not the ordinary scientists who appear at NASA press conferences. Nor are journalists, the ones who visit laboratories. On guided tours, we are talking about another level. From a closed, highly selective nucleus, made up of people who work behind the scenes in decisions that never become public. Knowledge. And this leads us to a hypothesis that is increasingly difficult to ignore. What if Mars exploration is not about exploration, but about occupation? What if the whole story we tell here below of missions full of failures, of probes that disappear, of discoveries that are never completed is just the surface of a much larger operation, which has already been underway for decades? Are the elite preparing for a new beginning beyond Earth, while the rest of humanity remains entertained with pretty videos, edited images, and promises of a future that may never come? This is a reflection that affects everything. With our notion of truth, with the role of science, with the limit between what is revealed and what is conveniently omitted. And more than that, it affects our sense of belonging. Because if there is another place being prepared, a habitable, structured, planned place, why isn't this information accessible to everyone? What defines who can know and who must remain in the dark? This mentality of exclusivity, of silent dominance over resources and discoveries, reveals a power structure that is not content with just governing physical territories. She wants to govern the imagination. You want to control what you believe is possible. And that's why these findings, even when they leak, are so quickly delegitimized. Because they have the potential to bring about transformation. Of turning internal keys to open the eyes of those who are ready to see. It's as if we are all living within a carefully scripted narrative. A story written to maintain the balance of what we know as normal. And when someone comes out of this story, when they start to investigate behind the scenes, they realize that what seemed like a conspiracy theory may, in fact, be the tip of a much older and well-structured system. And then, naturally, other questions arise. If there really is an active structure on Mars, and if that structure was built with advanced knowledge and secret resources, what else is being hidden? Is there another base? On the Moon, perhaps? On one of Jupiter's moons, or even here on Earth? In places where no one dares to investigate? These are legitimate questions, and more people are starting to ask themselves these same questions. And perhaps this is the great fear behind institutional silence. It is not that humanity is not ready for the truth. It's just that humanity, once awakened, begins to ask the right questions. And a population that asks, that investigates, that connects the dots, is a real threat to any control structure. That's why these conversation spaces are so important. Because here, right now, we're not just talking about Mars. We are talking about how truth can be shaped. About how decisions made behind closed doors can impact an entire civilization. And about how little by little we are building a new consciousness, more questioning, more attentive, more free. So tell me, with everything that has been exposed. So far, do you still think we are seeing the full story? Or do you also feel that there is something more, something behind the cameras, the speeches, and the beautiful images? Comment there. They are definitely hiding something. I want to see who else is awake to this reality. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this content really touched you. And that already says a lot. We live in a world where questioning has almost become an act of courage. So, if this video made you think, reflect, or even distrust a little more of what you're being shown, welcome to the team. If this type of content speaks to the way you see the world, if it helps you see with different eyes what previously seemed obvious, subscribe to the channel here. This way you continue following this journey of revelations, investigation, and expansion of consciousness. There's still a lot we need to talk about and take advantage and leave. A comment here saying, "I'm with you until the end." It's our silent way of recognizing who is awake, who is seeing beyond the surface. Oh, and if this video made you feel something, be it restlessness, curiosity, or even the desire to look for more, leave a like. It shows me that it's worth continuing to bring this type of content and helps this message reach those who need to hear it. There is a video here that complements this topic and can further expand what we have said so far. Click and stay with me there. because the truth, sometimes, is hidden in places that no one dares to look.